When I was growing up, one of the main TV networks, I think it was NBC, had a summer campaign called It's New to You. This was back in the days when new TV shows were basically only released during the school season, and they were released one at a time, and you could only watch them live. The horror. But those new to you shows were always worth watching, even if I had seen them before. This season, I'm re-releasing 9 meaningful episodes of the nearly 150 in the Graced Health podcast library. Perhaps you missed them and they're new to you, or perhaps you might find they reach you now in a different way that they did when they were initially put out there. You'll still get the new, shorter Ask the Trainer episodes, so keep tuning in on Thursdays and enjoy this one. There, I'm Amy Connell. Welcome to Graced Health, the podcast for women who want simple and grace-filled ways to take care of themselves and enjoy a little chocolate in the process. I'm a certified personal trainer and nutrition coach who wants you to know your eating, movement, and body don't have to be perfect. You just need to be able to do what you're called to do. Do you ever read books and then you go back and find yourself referencing them to your friends and to meaningful people in your life over and over and over? That is how the book Sacred Rest by Dr. Saundra Dalton-Smith impacted me. I read this book and honestly, I just keep using it as examples in my own personal life. I'm applying it to myself. There's a lot of things, a lot of opportunities I have to work on, but then I'm also offering some of the little nuggets that I gained from this book to my friends in our conversations, not because I know so much, but because I learned so much from this book. It is fantastic. Today, we dig into the 7 types of rest. Did you know that there's 7? I thought there was like physical and maybe mental, but there's 7 different types of rest. We go over some of the 12 gifts of rest, which again, some of these have really impacted me. Dr. Saundra and I talk a lot about social rest, which to me impacted me the most, especially in this COVID season. And social rest is not taking yourself off of Facebook, taking yourself off of social media, and just giving yourself a rest from a social perspective. I'm going to make you listen in so you can find out. I know you're going to just love what Dr. Saundra has to share with us today. Dr. Saundra Dalton-Smith is a board-certified internal medicine physician, speaker, and author. She's an international wellness expert. She's featured in numerous media outlets, including Prevention, MSNBC, Women's Day, Psychology Today, a guest on the Dr. Oz show. She's written 3 books. The latest is Sacred Rest, Recover Your Life, Renew Your Energy, Restore Your Sanity. And it really does include so many just insights on the types of rest that we need. Now, before we get into the conversation, I want to invite you to head over to gracedhealth.com/resources. I have curated all of my favorite goodies and would love to get them in your hand. Whether you are looking for support in your food, your faith, or your fitness, I have you covered. So go check it out over at gracedhealth.com/resources. Okay, let's bring on Dr. Saundra. Dr. Saundra, I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Oh, I'm happy to be here.
Oh gosh. So what has your day been like today? How is it going?
Typical mommy life, running around doing all the things. Dropped the kids off this morning to have one call and say, my tummy hurts, come pick me up. I'm like, okay, that's how the day goes.
Are both of your kids in face-to-face school right now? Because it seems like every school district and every class has just a little something like a different option.
Yeah, they have a hybrid going on at this point. So they are trying to get the kids in as much as possible. And then if there is in any type of contact or concern or fevers or any of those kind of things, then they do have the option of doing it virtually. So that's what my son will be doing. I mean, he has no other symptoms other than he probably ate something bad. But
yeah, I
at
know.
this point, he'll be doing the home version for a couple of days till his tummy calms down.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting how suspicious we get of everything. I don't think I've ever taken my temperature so much as I have during COVID. So I totally get that. Well, I'm really glad you're here. I'm so excited to have this conversation. I have to say, I was introduced to you, I think I was telling you before we got on, through Sherry Fletcher's podcast, Your Purpose Driven Life. And it was so fantastic. And I went out and I bought the book. And the first thing that I have to tell you is I felt such peace. Like you were so gentle in your writing. And I don't know if that was intentional or if that's just your writing voice, but it was such a gentle guidance throughout the whole book. So I thank you for that because that's what we need, right? With our rest.
Well, thank you for saying that. I think, you know what, this is probably I've written 3 books, and I would probably say this one is the one that is the most personal. I tell more of my own story in it. And it's
Mhm.
the one that I wrote from kind of really a submissive place with God. So I don't come at it necessarily like I'm the expert, even though there's a lot of medical and science and all of that. But I knew I just couldn't share just that. I had to kind of share my own struggle with it. So I think that helps with being gentle when you when you understand the struggle like personally like that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's start there. Can you just tell us a little bit about your journey to finding your own sacred rest? Can you let us know a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, the my journey started, I'm an internal medicine physician, so I've always really thought of rest as kind of being more that thing people do who can't keep up with the rest of us. I've always kind of been a high achiever, let's get stuff done. I'll rest when I'm dead kind of a mindset. It was never something I really put any focus or emphasis on. And so about 10 years, I've been practicing now for 20 years, but about 10 years in, I hit a wall. I got to a place where my life looked really successful on the outside. I had book contracts and speaking engagements and in the news and all these different things that on the surface just look so successful. And I felt horrible every day. Every day I would wake up, my neck would hurt, my back would hurt. I had all the stress findings kind of within my body manifesting themselves because keeping up at that pace was killing me. I mean, it was
Yeah.
killing me slowly, and it was killing my mental kind of processes and my joy and my faith and my relationships. And I just got to a point where I just couldn't do it anymore. My kids were both toddlers at the time, and they were blessings I had prayed for. I mean, it wasn't easy for my husband and I to get pregnant. So when we had our first son, we were like overjoyed. And then the second came quick after the first. Before we had time
Yeah.
to really finish rejoicing, the second one was on the way. So it was one of those things where I already felt overwhelmed. And then to have 2 kids in diapers at the same time, pulling
Mhm.
on mommy right and left, and an office full of patients, and a hospital to go to, and a husband who still wants some of your attention. I burned out. I hit the wall. And I remember
Yeah.
coming home one day and I was so at the end of myself. I just could not see doing one more thing that day. And I just laid out on the floor. I put the kids in front of the TV set and I was like, okay, it was like my electronic babysitter. Just stay here and stay put while mommy goes and rest for a minute. And I just laid on the foyer floor so I could at least see them kind of at the side of my eye, make sure they weren't like in harm's way. But I was like, God, if this is it, if this is success, if this is what I've been praying and working for, I don't want it. I don't know what I want to happen right now, but this is not what I want. And I just remember in that moment, I just really felt his presence more unlike anything I'd ever felt before in my life. And it was as if I could just sense him saying to me, this is the first time you've stopped long enough to even inquire of me about your life. And that
Mm.
was rough.
Wow. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was a rough moment. Because I considered myself a woman of faith. I had, led Bible studies in my house and was, speaking to people about God and faith. And it was during that season that God really showed me how closely my ability to rest related to my ability to trust Him. Not just say that I trust Him, but truly trust Him with everything
Mhm.
and trust Him enough to actually stop and to honor the need for rest in my life.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And I can relate a lot with just that need for do, go, 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 check it off. I mean, all of the productivity stuff that you talk about in the book. And I feel like that's just such a moment of surrender, of just laying down. And I know that that's probably not what you intended to do. You just needed a stinking break, right? But just I've had my own experience and my own of stopping and resting and listening
Mhm.
to God. And it's really powerful what he'll reveal to you when you stop long enough to listen. I totally get that. Thank you for sharing that. I was wondering if we could just kind of dig in to your book, because this is Dr. Saundra. I have to tell you, like, I kind of want to flip through. You and I are on Zoom right now. I know listeners can't see, but I want you to be able to see like all of the underlining that I have done in here. And this is one that I keep referencing when I'm talking to friends, because you have so many just valuable nuggets in here, and I really appreciate it. And I'm working on applying it to my own life.
So am
Not
I.
all of them. But in the book, you talk about the 7 different types of rest. So I
Mhm.
was wondering if you could run through them really quickly and give a quick explanation for some of them, and then because I have to say, well, some of them I was kind of surprised at. We'll just stop with there. So I'll let you go
Sure.
through and explain some of them,
Well, I'll start off by
or
naming
explain all
them, I
7.
guess.
Yeah,
So the
sorry.
7 types of rest are the physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, sensory, social, and creative. And I think most people are very familiar with the physical, mental, and spiritual. Those I think have hit the literature and been out there enough that most people are aware of those. The ones I find that people are more surprised about tend to be sensory, which they know they have senses. You know, they know they're using their senses, but they've never thought about resting them as being something that they need to do.
Yeah.
The creative one, most people have never even heard of, but they have experienced it in some way. For example, a lot of people experience creative rest when they go to beaches or when they're outside in nature, and they can't quantify it, but they know that they feel better. They feel revived and renewed and refreshed in those settings. So they've experienced creative rest, even though they didn't know what to call it or really, how it affected them, how it actually helps them in their day to day life. Another one is social rest. A lot of times when I say that, people automatically think, oh, she means I need to get off, Facebook or whatever and not be around people. And actually, not being around people, being in solitude is more sensory rest. Social
Yeah.
rest is the rest we experience when we allow life giving people, when we're around life giving people. It's that pouring in from others that we receive. Whereas many of our relationships are actually giving relationships where we are pouring out into other people, like our children or our spouses or whoever we work with or for. And there's very few people in our lives that are just there to pour back into us. They don't need anything from us. They don't have any request from us. You just enjoy being around them and you get fed by their presence. That's what social rest looks like. And that's one that a lot of people are missing, particularly now that you can't be around some of your socially restful people, probably.
Absolutely. So that actually, and I don't know if it was the time that I read it in, we're still in COVID. But that was the social rest hit me so hard and was able to help me connect some dots that I couldn't figure out why I felt certain ways, and with certain people, why I just related so deeply to them.
Mhm.
And it's funny because I assumed the same thing. Oh, social rest is getting off Facebook. Social rest means not getting on Instagram every time I have just a couple extra minutes or something like that. And if you don't mind, I want to, I want to, I want to quote you here. And of course, now that I'm under the gun, here it is. Okay. I love how you say this. Social rest is about making space for those relationships that revive you. When you're with a friend, you feel comfortable being around who makes you feel as you could tell them anything. You're experiencing social rest. These social rest relationships make you feel valued and take your concerns seriously. So, I just wanted to share a little story with you. I went in July. I
Mhm.
dropped my son off at camp and we didn't know if he was going to be able to make it or not because of COVID. And like, we didn't know until I dropped him off and I was like, okay, he's here. I think he's here for 2 weeks.
Mhm.
And then I have a good friend who lives about an hour away from there. So I went to go see her. And actually, I take that back. We met for a walk. So we met at this small little Texas town and she gets out of the car and we mask up and I grasped onto her and sobbed. And I
Mm.
didn't even know why. I just started sobbing. I couldn't do it. And I finally was able to get out the words, I'm okay. Like, because I didn't know what was going on. Like, I don't even know if I said hi. I just grasped onto her. She's one of my dearest, dearest friends.
Mhm.
And when I read your book, I was like, that is exactly what I had needed because
Yes.
because we couldn't see. I mean, we couldn't be around each other. And I've been helping other people identify when, like, another girlfriend of mine was just at a funeral, and obviously the funeral was sad, but she was around all of her cousins, and
Mhm.
she said, I don't know why, but I felt so much better the last few days, or the couple days after the funeral.
Mhm.
And I said, well, are you close with your cousins? She goes, oh my gosh, they're like my best friends. I grew up with them. And I pulled in, I was like, well, this is what I just learned from the book Sacred Rest. And she said, I just got chills. So I think you've really honed in on something there. And I know that was, that's all from God, but I think identifying that, especially in terms of COVID, has been really impactful to me. So all of that, sorry, all the little, I just love to tell you, I want to tell you like how this has impacted me so
I
much.
love that. And I experienced that myself, so I can totally get that. Our family's been doing virtual church, like most of the world. And our
Yeah.
church eventually, opened up where they could take like a couple of people like each time it opened. And so we actually went to church finally, like maybe after 4 months of not being at church. We went one time. It was our turn to be able to go. And my pastor and I have a really close relationship. And he was on stage giving his sermon, and at the end, it was time to go. We put our mask on, my family and I. We were headed toward the door, and I heard him say, Dr. Saundra, Dr. And I turned around and he was right there. And both of us, because our relationship has been so close for so long, we just kind of fell into each other's arm in this big bear hug, kind of
Yeah.
father daughter kind of bear hug, and just stayed there forever because we need that. We need
Yeah.
the presence of those people who speak into our lives. And that to me has probably been the hardest part of COVID. You can get, and I talk about this, you can get social rest virtually. When turn the cameras on, actually have that presence experience where you can see someone's facial expressions and their mannerisms. But there's something about being in the physical presence of someone who accepts you. There's a healing
Yeah.
that happens just in those moments. So I pray of all these things that's going on with COVID that we continue to have those moments in our lives.
Yeah. Well, and I'm wondering how you recommend to either your patients or to other people who are craving that social rest,
Mhm.
what you recommend to people to foster that during COVID, because it's a lot harder right now. We
It
all
is
know
a
that.
lot harder. And what I've been recommending is to try to keep their interactions small and purposeful. So, we're trying to limit exposure and exposing people who, you don't want to get your friends sick or get sick yourself. But if you've been kind of social distancing, using masks, doing all the things to try to keep yourself healthy, and you asked your friend and they say, "Yeah, I've been doing all the things too." Mask up, go have a coffee, invite her over or him or however it works over for a coffee or do it outside even. They don't
Yeah.
have to physically come in your house. The risks are lower outside. So, if it's freezing, bundle up and just get some hot beverage and kind of spend 15 minutes just talking, just hugging on each other out in the open air, just being able to see them. And then if you can't, because two of my closest friends are across the world, one's in Canada, the other one's on the West Coast, and I'm on the East Coast. So what we've been doing, and we've been doing this for over 8 years now, we meet virtually. We've always met virtually.
Oh,
And once a
really?
year we would get together as for a little girls retreat.
Hmm.
Well, obviously this year we can't do that. We planned something that we can't do. So we just increase the number of virtual times that we get together, and we do things that we would normally do in person to get on virtually now. Like we started
Yeah.
a Bible study together. We never do Bible study by Zoom together. We always go to a conference and kind of enjoy that experience face to face with each other. But, with COVID, we're all having to change things up a little bit, get a little bit more creative, but
Creative.
still try
Yeah.
to make sure that you're keeping that physical component to it, because just texting or just
Hmm.
writing emails, it doesn't do the same thing for your social rest.
Yeah. Yeah, you're so right. I mean, that's funny that you say creative because that was the word that was coming to me as you were talking about that. I'm like, we've got to think outside of what we normally do
Mhm.
to survive this time. And I will tell you, walks and outside have been definitely my saving grace with that and getting that social rest. I've got a girlfriend who I walk with and
Yeah,
have the same thing. So yeah,
that's a great
that's
one because you're outside, so CDC can't get mad at you. You're doing you're, masked up if necessary, a prayer walk outside, masked up with a friend. I think it's a great way to keep getting that social rest.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely been really key for me. Definitely. So how have you seen rest changing in the last 8 months? I mean, life has changed and I don't know what your work life is, if you're still practicing in person all the time, or if you're doing more virtual, but how have you witnessed others experiencing rest differently since COVID hit?
I think the number one thing that I'm seeing is that people have really struggled, and some are still struggling quite a bit with the whole work life integration when work invaded your home and school
Yes.
invaded your home and church invaded your home. Everything that you used to go
Ev-
outside of the house to do kind of all came indoors. And
Mhm.
so your home, where you may have, realistically, the statistics, and I won't, I'm a I'm the kind of brain that always is looking at statistics, but statistically, most of us spent very little time in our home. Our time
Yeah.
was always
Yeah.
spent outside of the home. And so then we take this year, 2020, and we completely flip the script for kids, for adults, for everybody. Now it's the exact opposite of what it's always been.
Yeah.
And so people are having trouble with that integration. How do I separate work life from home life? They were having a hard enough time doing that when work was outside of the home.
Yeah.
Now that they're in the same building, people are really struggling because now it's too easy to just flip on your computer and keep working and not have an end date or
Mhm.
end time, that you're not going to be working, or working on the weekends where you normally would kind of rest, as some people say, on the weekend, whatever that meant for them. And so I find that a lot of people who had some level of balance have even had difficulty because now they're having to create boundaries where they never had to create them. They were already just naturally enforced by location. And so
Yeah.
when you take away the location boundaries, you then have to erect the boundaries yourself. And that's hard for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, can you give us some good examples of boundaries we can create so we can kind of keep work and home and create that rest within each?
Yeah, one of the key ones would be to try to have some differentiation between where you're working and the rest of your home life. And I
Hmm.
know that's hard for some people because I have people say, I don't have some mega huge house, where I can have a separate
Yeah.
office space. And I get that. But let's say if you're going to work at your kitchen table, because that's what I'm hearing a lot of people are doing. They're working at their kitchen table. If that's the case, when you close up your laptop at the end of the day, remove it from the kitchen table and put it
Yeah.
somewhere else to stay charged. So
That's a
now
great
you have
idea.
you have you have basically stated this has ended and you don't go back to it. If you're wanting to kind of do a little bit of social media at the end of the day or something, you have to purposely go get the computer back to do that. It's not as easy just to kind of sit down in between cooking dinner and click click click, and oh, somebody sent me an email on my work, then now let me check that too.
Yeah.
You can
Oh,
start
guilty
taking
as
back some
charged.
control. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's what people are doing. Their work is just kind of infiltrating into everything. I
Yeah.
also like for people to think about using time blocks. For example, if you find that news or social media is stressing you out, every time you do it, you leave the screen anxious, to not do it all day long, to not just kind of do it haphazardly whenever a notification pops up, turn the notifications off and take back control to be able to say, from 10 to 12 is when I'm going to do emails, or whatever time block works for you. And that's when you deal with those things. Then you can have a shorter time block later in the day to kind of evaluate and make, do a quick skim through it to make sure that there's not an emergent email that's popped up from the school or something like that.
Right.
But then don't go back in there till the next time block that next day. Because honestly, most of the time what I'm finding is people are scanning their emails all day long, which for a lot of us, opening emails is stressful.
Mm-hmm.
That's why
Mm-hmm.
that's why
Yeah.
cleaning up your inbox and getting rid of subscriptions you don't need can be a stress relief all by itself, just to try to get back some control.
Yeah, that's so true. And that's something you probably are going to help me instigate that in myself, because I'm definitely guilty of opening up and scanning. It's like, okay, is there anything I need to see? Is there anything I need to see? And then and then my problem is I leave things unopened and then I miss things. I'm like I'm the worst with the email. Well, I have a very cluttery email, which actually leads to the next thing that I was wanting to talk about. You give a really great example of having a really cluttery office in the beginning of your book, and then relating that to how our mind can get really cluttery. And then you said something that I actually just kind of wanted to understand a little bit more. You said,
Yeah.
rather than willingly focusing on positive, affirming thoughts, the mind prefers to settle upon negative ones that intensify stress, worry, anger, and frustration. And those are total cluttery thoughts. I get that. I'm guilty of that. I see that sometimes in people I love. So I think everyone can relate to this in one way or another, especially this year. But I'm wondering, why is that the mind's default to
It's
go
easier.
to the negative stuff?
It's easier. It's almost like I always kind of relate it to that suction drain like thing at the toilet. It's like once you start the spiral down,
Oh,
it just keeps going and going.
yeah.
That's kind of how the brain works with negative thoughts. It's the easiest route for it to take. It doesn't require resistance. And so if it doesn't require any resistance, then that's where it's going to gravitate to. And plus we are in an environment, majority of us, that perpetuates that negative thought process. Though it's rare that news is actually positive or uplifting. So
Yeah.
if most of what you're consuming is feeding that negative mindset, what you feed grows. That's a common saying. And so it just keeps that as the kind of center of where your mind wants to go. To redirect it takes energy. And
Yeah.
some of us, we don't feel like we have energy for one more thing. So trying to train our brain to go back to a positive feels almost too difficult. So a lot of times we just kind of let it sit wherever it's at, rather than doing maybe affirmations or scriptures or those things that keep us on a positive mindset. We just let the mind go in whatever direction it wants, and it will always take you down the negative. It will
Yeah.
never voluntarily just say, hey, let's be happy today. Joy. It's going to be like, no, today's horrible. So
Well, and thank you for clarifying that. And it's so true. And I think intentionality of being positive, it takes intentionality. It takes
Mhm.
effort. And, I've talked about the positive thinking and how your brain can retrain itself to be positive, but that also retraining. I mean, my listeners are health minded and active, and training. I mean, training's hard. I've trained for a half marathon. That's hard.
Mhm.
Sometimes I don't feel like putting that energy into thinking positive thoughts sometimes. So I totally get that. Thank you for clarifying that.
Well, you know what? I don't either. I don't feel like because I know a lot of people really get into kind of having a list of positive affirmations that they say, and I think that can be very beneficial. I have
Yeah.
never been one that has been drawn to that. So what I do is the creative, restful things that I kind of surround myself with, I make sure that they have a positive message. So like the art that's in my house has
Mhm.
positive messages on it. It'll say like hope or life or love or laugh, or I mean, they're not like overtly something that anyone walking up would be like, does she have a room full of positive affirmations on her wall? You know what I mean? It doesn't look like that. But what it does, I'll oftentimes, even the picture behind me has like this little bitty, the word hope written within one of the flowers. No one would really even
Neat.
see it, but I
I'm
know it's
looking
there.
behind you. I'm trying to look for it.
I know it's there. And so
Yeah.
when I see that, I because I know it's there, I purposely got it for that reason. I'm able to have that positive affirmation spoken to me. I put it in the bathroom. Over the toilet,
Wow.
I have positive affirmings because you
That's
go in there a couple of times at least every day, and you have some positive affirmations without it being kind of overtly like, what's this in the bathroom? It doesn't say, repeat after me, you're going to have a good day. That works for some people. That doesn't work for me.
yeah.
For me, it has
Yeah.
to be more kind of just naturally ingrained within my surroundings. And then that keeps my mind going back to the positive when it catches the images of those things.
Yeah, that's great. That connects some dots for me. One thing I love is coffee mugs. Like I have way too many coffee mugs and I don't know why, but now I think I do. Like this one today, I don't know if you can see it. You can't see it very well, but it says cup of happy.
There
And
you
then
go.
another one that I love is thankful and blessed. And so there's I have several that kind of have that positive aspect to it. And now one of them, another one says joy. So
Yeah.
yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I'm looking for positive affirmations with my coffee and Jesus time. There we go.
I love that. And I highly recommend that for anyone who works in a stressful situation or
Yeah.
your home. If your home tends to be a stressful situation nowadays, get a couple of items. We're not talking like spending thousands on artwork. I have just a couple of little like sign blocks. They're just like those little like wooden blocks that have like
Uh-huh.
big block letters written across them. And one of them that I got this year in COVID says unshakable, just to remind me that no
Oh,
matter what gets thrown at us, that we have an unshakable foundation in Christ, and we can stand secure on that. I need that reminder. It's sitting on the center of the TV so that my kids, when they even if they're not trying to see it, have to see it.
they have to see it. That's great. Oh, that's so good. Okay, so you kind of talked a little bit about the 7 different types of rest. And then in the book, you give several gifts
Mhm.
that honoring that those different types of rest can give us. So I was wondering if I again, I don't know if people do this to you, so if you're not used to it, I'm sorry. But I wanted to share some of these nuggets that you've given, and you can go into them a little bit more if you want to.
Okay.
But and I'm going from the back because this is how I have my book marked, but in the gift of choice. So one of the let's just do it this. Why don't you describe the gift of choice and then I'll tell you my favorite part of that chapter.
Well, there's 12 gifts for those who haven't read the book. So there's 12
Yes.
gifts, and good Lord, don't ask me all 12. I don't know if I could pull all of them off the top of my head, but the gift of choice is probably one of my favorite ones. My entire ministry is based around I choose my best life. And I
Yeah.
think for most people, what they don't understand is when you start doing more restful activity, you start understanding your need for rest. You see that that you have choices in the process, that by resting you open up opportunities that you wouldn't open up otherwise because you'd be too busy kind of just running from your routine, running from busy to busy to busy without evaluating your options and actually seeing the choices that are before you. And I think that for me, that has been one of the most freeing. The freedom is one of the other gifts, but that's been one of the most freeing parts of resting, is seeing that I don't have to just keep doing things just because I've always done them, because I
Yeah.
feel like that exhausts a lot of us. You get almost like trapped in these roles just because you've always done them. And it's not necessarily because it's where God even wants you or it's what you're supposed to be doing in this season. But you've always been the one who's always done the women's retreat. So you must keep doing it, right? Absolutely not. There's
Yeah.
choices that have to be made, and by resting you're able to reflect and to be, that's another one, being able to kind of see how all of these things play together. And the good part about the gifts of rest is that they're not things you have to try to get. Like you have to intentionally work on getting the 7 types of rest, but the gifts come just by applying what you learn about getting those 7 types. You naturally start seeing that you have that choices become available to you. that you're noticing
Yeah.
freedom in different areas of your life, that you're establishing boundaries, that you're communicating better, that you're reflecting on things. These are things that are just naturally occurring. That's why I call them gifts, because you don't have to work for them in the rest. They just start appearing as you process.
Yeah, that's really great. And I love too that you offer more gifts than the types of rest we have to be intentional about. And I think too, that's such a great reminder about the gift of choice when we do embrace rest, because I know when something comes across my plate and I'm like, I don't know, should I do about it? I'm going to pray about it. And it never occurs to me, Dr. Saundra, that if I say yes to this, it means I probably need to say no to something else. Like it's just about, well, how can I squeeze this in my calendar?
Right.
Yeah. And the other thing one of my favorite quotes from this chapter is you say, the power to choose begins with rest. Rest reminds you that you're not the creator of power, but the recipient. And so when we sit in the rest, then, you know, it's obviously God creates that power,
Hmm.
and then he gives us that ability to choose and to be thoughtful and intentional about what we're doing. So that was great. Talk a little bit about the gift of productivity, because if I'm honest, I would say I'll do anything to be more productive.
Yeah, I'm the same way. My type A type personality gravitates toward let's get stuff done, check it off the box. And, it doesn't make sense that rest would actually make you more productive. But I think what you have to understand what all of us have to understand with that is, many of us, we're producing from our exhaustion. We're producing from our emptiness. So
Yeah.
we come into our jobs or our work or whatever it is that we're trying to put our hands to, and we're already not at 100%. We're not even at 90. Most of us are just, barely getting to 50, 60 every day before we start our day. And so we start at 60, and that's the best we can pour into whatever we produce. When we actually take the time to rest and actually restore ourselves and get ourselves in those higher levels of rest, those 70s, 80s, where you feel good and you feel empowered and you feel stronger, then you're actually producing higher quality every time that you produce something.
Yeah.
And so you're not giving out of your 60% self, you're giving out of, let's say, your 80% self. So the product that you're producing is much higher quality. And I think we have to get out of the mindset of that quantity is more important. I think really what we want is we want excellent work, and that requires the best of ourselves. And so for those who want to be high producers who are producing excellent work, rest is the route to get there. I honestly believe that we would have kind of more advances in medicine, more advances in technology, more advances in art and creativity if people rested better, because then we would actually be getting their best work, not just any work.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's really powerful. That reminds me of I have a high school junior, and his schedule is just bananas right now. I feel really bad. I mean, I feel really bad for him. And he's exhausted, and he's trying to, he's work academics and all of that kind of stuff. And I have told him, like, look, you can go to bed and
Hmm.
then wake up a little early tomorrow. Your brain is going to be so much fresher if you do some studying in the morning, which is really scary to do. And he has noticed some of the, he doesn't always do it, and that's okay. It's his journey. It's his place to
Hmm.
figure out. But even something like that, of just calling it a night, just call it, and take your physical rest if you need to, and digging back in the next day. I've noticed that myself. I love how you say productivity is getting things done that matter and seeing good fruits growing in your life. I mean, that's exactly what you're talking about with that quality. And then the quote you gave from Mary O'Connor, I'd never heard. So thank you for introducing, but you say it's not so much how busy you are, but why you're busy. The bee is praised, the mosquito is swatted. So I've been like, oh, am I, are they mosquitoes or are they bees around me? So I love how you talk about the good fruit there. And then let's talk a little bit about the gift of boundaries. So
Mhm.
go to explain a little bit about that because I have another story for that.
Yeah, boundaries are really just kind of putting some markers around your life and your time more specifically, and how you're going to prioritize your energy, how you're going to prioritize the time you have in each day. It's always interesting. People sometimes will ask me, how do you do all of what you do? How are you a physician and you're speaking and you're writing and you got kids and a husband? How are you doing all of this?
Yeah, I've wondered the same thing.
Yeah, I have some very strict boundaries around my life, and I'm constantly doing personal assessments. I don't do the rest quiz over and over again. Someone asked me that, but no, I don't do the rest quiz as far as going on the computer and doing it. But in my head, I do the rest quiz just about every day. I
Yeah.
assess myself and I say, what's tired? Because it's easy to say I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I'm drained, but what's tired? Because that's where
Yeah.
you're needing to restore. So I'm constantly doing that. And then when I do that quick self assessment, like the other day, I was doing a lot of work on my computer over and over again for hours at a time, not really getting the breaks that I normally would get because I was trying to meet a deadline. And I remember at the end of that day of trying to push through, which I know not to do, I quickly was like, okay, I'm going to have to push that deadline back because I'm not doing that to my body ever again. I I know that's not safe for me because I know that's what happened when I burned out the first time. I would push through my body's language. It would be
Yeah.
telling me, we're tired, your shoulders are hurt, you've been looking at this screen too long, take a break. And I'm like, no, I got to meet this deadline. And one of the boundaries for myself is that I'm going to have a boundary that I'm not going to beat myself up to try to please someone else's deadlines or demands. And so if it requires me to have to give too much of myself where I'm not even going to be producing the work that I desire, then it's better for them and for me to say, you know what, I need to move this deadline back by 2 weeks or month or whatever whatever it is that I'm needing to move around or to reprioritize something. So if it's something that I maybe had listed that I was going to do this week, but it's not high priority on my list, don't just try to check it off, to try to rearrange things and get the boundaries back in my life where I have time to sit quietly before God, where I have time to go for that 30-minute run, where I have
Hmm.
time to do my stretches on the floor. Those things that I know are necessary for me to stay in a good headspace and body space, that I'm not just giving them up because of somebody else's demands or even unnecessary demands that I'm putting on myself.
Yeah. Was that hard to implement? Like, hey, you know what? We've got to push this back 2 weeks. I mean, I'm a recovering people pleaser and I probably still have some problems with it. That makes me feel anxious just in that. So
Just
I
the
really,
thought of it. It is.
yes.
It is because I'm a people pleaser as well. I don't like disappointing people.
Yeah.
And I had to kind of get a mindset shift on that because I started to really kind of evaluate what would disappoint them more, suboptimal work or being truthful about where I'm at, and to
Yeah.
learn to trust
Okay. Hold on. You got to say that again because that was really good.
because think about it. I mean, if we're pushing through to meet a deadline, we're working out of our emptiness again. We're working out of that 60, 50, 40 sometimes
Yeah.
percent of ourselves and our creativity and all of that we're offering. Is that really what they wanted? Because
Hmm.
it's not. They wanted the best of us to show up. And so when we are allowing ourselves to kind of focus on that, we're assuming that they would rather have our suboptimal work than to have us actually be truthful about what's going on with us and where we're at. So you end up getting like a little bit of emotional rest in just being truthful. I can't meet this deadline and give you the type of work I want to produce. And people respect that
Yeah.
because they do. They want the best of you. They don't want just your scraps at the end of what you poured out. And so when you're able to just be honest about that, and it's there's a vulnerability that comes with that. There's a lot of
Hmm.
growth and courage that has to rise up in that. But the more you do it, the easier it gets. And also for those people who, like, I've had trouble with this in the past. Someone says, "Hey, would you like to speak at our event?" And you're like, "Oh, that's a great event. I would love to go speak there." But something else is going on that's higher priority to you. Like for myself, if my kids, I have one son who plays football and another who plays basketball, I try to be at every game. And
Yeah.
so I don't care how big the event is or what they're trying to pay me or how many people are going to be there. I've got to say no to whatever that event is if it doesn't line up with my priorities in this season of my life. My ninth grader and 11th grader are not going to be in school forever. I'm not going to be able to get those moments back. And so that conference, if it keeps going, then great. Then I'll speak there another time. If it doesn't, then great. I did what was high priority for me, and to keep those boundaries in place, even when you have to don't want to say disappoint yourself, but you have to kind of tame your level of disappointment, because am I going to disappoint at this level or that level?
Yeah.
Am I going to disappoint myself in not living up to my priorities, which at this right now is with my family? Or am I going to
Right.
disappoint myself by saying no, which is what I really want to do?
Right.
You
Right.
know,
Yeah, I totally get that. So first of all, my kids are in the same grades that yours are, and you're right. I mean, I have um we're not going to get this time back. Now, that's not to say that right now, so I'm sure my older one's like, I need this semester to be over. But we're not wishing it away, but it has been hard. And I've got a basketball player too. But so that's a lot of games that you have to go
yeah,
to, because
a lot
football's
of
once a
games.
week, basketball is twice a week. But yeah, and I think too, I get more personally, I can't speak for everyone else, but when I disappoint myself, or I'm disappointed in how I handled a situation, or that I wasn't able to do something, that is far worse than when I'm upset, or than when I've disappointed somebody else
Mhm.
with that. So yeah, that's really great. And the other thing that I have in this gift of boundaries that you talk about, I won't repeat it, or I won't read it all to you, but you tell the story of, you're you're going to take a day off, and you're like, all right, I'm going to have a soul care day. And it just, I mean, it just doesn't turn out the
Falls
way that you
apart.
think. Yes. Yes. It falls apart. And I cannot tell you how many times that I'm like, maybe it's not a day, but it's a couple hours, or it's this period of time, and it never turns into what I think it's going to. And in fact,
Mhm.
a girlfriend of mine a couple weeks ago called, and she said, "Don't tell anybody, but all of my appointments today were canceled." She's like, "I don't have anything." And so I just finished this section. I said, "So what are you going to do? And how will this be successful for you?" Because I love it in there. You say, "Don't expect others to give permission to take care of yourself." I
Never
mean,
happens. Never
never.
happens.
It never does. No one is ever like, "Oh, you've got a soul care day. All right. Well, make sure that you don't do whatever, make sure you don't
Mhm.
come sell books, for the book drive,
Right.
like or whatever." So yeah, that's just, I mean, these, you have so many wonderful just little nuggets and applicable things. One of the things that I do at the end of my episode is I'll kind of try and take a whole conversation and say, what's the one simple thing I want you to remember? And I
Mhm.
feel like you've given us a lot of really great simple things. So actually, I'll just say that. What is one simple thing that you would love for people to do in terms of finding the rest that they need?
I think for most people, probably the first step they have to do is determine which of the 7 types of rest they are deficient in.
Yeah.
That's why, if, as you notice in the book, I think maybe on chapter 1 or 2 or so, I tell people, stop the book right now, flip to the back, do the rest quiz. And, we switched into making it online at restquiz.com for people to be able to do it as well. But that's why, because until you really start kind of getting a mindset of, I'm not just tired, something's exhausted within me.
Right.
There's a part of me that needs to be restored, not just I'm tired, restore my whole body. And until you kind of get that mindset and really start focusing on the specific area that you're needing to have rest in, rest seems like hopeless, because all of us have rested on the weekend. We took the day
Yeah.
off, we watched Netflix, we laid around on the couch, and we got up on Monday and we were still exhausted as if nothing ever
Yes.
happened. And it's a really desperate situation when that happens, because you feel like I rested and it didn't fix my fatigue. And that's when
Yes.
people start feeling hopeless, and that's where a lot of people are when they are introduced to my work. They say something like that, it's like, "I'm just tired all the time," and a friend says, "Hey, you know what? I just learned some stuff from this book that maybe it's helpful for you." And,
Yeah.
that's been probably the greatest joy for me as well. Just
I
seeing
love
how
that.
God's kind of used that, the book's overtly Christian. Obviously, I talk about Jesus through half of the entire book.
Which is
Um,
great.
but I do divide it up. What I found is that um, people who even don't believe in my faith system have been able to benefit from it because of the way it's kind of segmented out into the part one and part two, pulling the
Hmm.
spiritual kind of into the gift section of it. Um, but I love that that it's been able to be used in many different areas because of that.
Yeah. Well, it's been great. And yes, and I think too, the rest quiz can offer someone a different perspective because
Mhm.
I've been there. I mean, I remember not too long ago going to bed on a Sunday night and I turned to my husband. I said, "How is it I am more tired on a Sunday night going into the week than I am on a Thursday night? This is crazy." So I think you offer some really great perspectives in there. And I really appreciate it. It's a fantastic book. And I really hope everyone goes out and first does the rest quiz, but then and then also buys the book. Um, okay, can you tell us really quickly how people can connect with you? Because you have a lot of different resources out there.
Yeah, my main website is I choose my best life.com. And from there, you can get to the rest quiz, you can get to the podcast, um, lots of different things on the website that you can check out.
Yeah. Well, and you have a U version devotional, which I actually just
Mhm.
completed with a couple friends, and it was really fun to see their reactions. I was like, I'm interviewing her. So that was really fun to do. And yes, and your podcast. And I'm so sorry. Tell me the name of it again because it escapes me.
It's the same as the website. I choose my best life.
Great. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Okay, so I have two more questions,
Mhm.
which are completely different.
Okay.
One is something I've been asking many of my guests or all of my guests as of late. And that is I am fascinated by tattoos. I think that sometimes people have them and have a really fantastic story that goes along with them. So I was wondering if you had any tattoos, if you would be willing to share a story about it. And then if you don't, if you had to get one,
Okay.
what would it be and where would it go?
Oh, that's a great question. Let's see. I don't have any tattoos, but if I had to get one, the second I heard your question, I knew what I would get. It would be a butterfly.
Uh-huh.
And where it would go, I think it would go on my right shoulder blade is where I envision it being. And specifically, I just love the whole metamorphosis of the butterfly, that whole journey that they take.
Yeah.
From being an earth dweller, so to speak, to being airborne with wings. I love that, just the whole imagery of that and the transformation that has to occur for that to happen.
That's beautiful. I love that. I don't have any either. And we'll have this question at the dinner table about once every 6 months. And my boys are like, "Mom, are you just going to get one?" I'm like, "No, I really don't." I've never wanted one, but I'm fascinated by them. I think they're really, I think that the intentionality, speaking of that, that goes into them oftentimes has
Mhm.
some really neat and powerful meanings behind that. And then on the other spectrum, not the other spectrum, but I was wondering if you had a meaningful Bible verse you would like to share with us.
My Bible, well, I have a lot of life, I call them life verses that I've clung to throughout the years. But the one that I would probably say that changed my life was from Isaiah 30:15, where it says, "In returning and rest shall you be saved, and quietness and trust shall be your strength." And then the last sentence says, "But you would have none of it." Because the first time, I'm sure I'd probably read that before. I've read through the Bible
Yeah.
a few times before I ever, got to that point in my life. But when I got to that point in my life, during the time that I was burned out, the sentence, but you would have none of it. That really kind of dawned on me, that whole, this is a choice. I'm either choosing to stay in this life that I'm in that's stressed out, burned out, maxed out, or I can choose something different, but the choice is still mine. And so if what I've built currently is not what I want, then I can build something else. And I can kind of break down the dysfunction of what I've built and build something better this go around. And that's kind of the foundation of all that I do now, is kind of looking at those choices and thinking about, how do I move forward into my best life a life that I'm building on the principles of the Bible in a way that still honors the Word of God and
Hmm.
keeps me moving forward within my day-to-day life, where it's practical. I'm not just reading scripture, but I'm
Yeah.
practically applying it to my life.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. I know that's something I strive to do as well. It's like, okay, this is wonderful sitting here in the morning. And
Mhm.
now we're going to go out through my day and applying that. Oh gosh, that's fantastic. Well, Dr. Saundra, thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate your time, your wisdom, and your message. I mean, you have a wonderful ministry going, and I really encourage people to go out and get Sacred Rest by Dr. Saundra Dalton Smith, because it's definitely something I have been going back and back and back to, and I know I will for a long time.
Oh, well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be on chatting with you.
I hope you heard what I meant by when I said that she is just gentle and brings such peace. I really enjoyed that conversation. I hope you were able to gather a little bits and nuggets as well. And I really encourage you to go check out her book, Sacred Rest. And also, get the YouVersion reading plan. It is fantastic. Like I said, I did that with a few friends and we really enjoyed doing that. Now, I also just kind of want to take an opportunity to admit that I am still learning this process and learning the interview process. I finished the interview and then went to have lunch, and my older son is doing online learning. So he came down at the same time I did, and he was like, "Well, how was your interview?" And I said, "Well, I'm still kind of figuring out how to interview people best, because I try and do a lot of research before they come on." So when she got on, I felt like I was like ready to go and I know everything. And I don't always remember that you're not coming from that same space. So I apologize if I did not leave enough time for discussion surrounding those 7 types of rest. In hindsight, I wish I would have asked a little bit more about that so you could have learned more. So that's on me, but I hope that you can check out our book, go get it and learn for yourself, because like I said, I have so much highlighted and underlined and with those little bitty mini Post-it notes all through it. I know you will really enjoy it too with that investment. It's a fantastic book. Don't forget to get your download, the free one, How to Enjoy Shame-Free Health by Breaking 8 Health Rules, over at gracedhealth.com/bad rules. And if there's someone you know whom today's conversation would serve, I would love it if you would share it with them or on social media. That really does help the show bring awareness, and mostly it serves other people. Also, if you haven't subscribed to the show, I invite you to click that button so you can go find your Graced Health each week. And of course, go check out the rest quiz. It's going to really give you some good insight into what kind of rest you need. It's at restquiz.com. What's the one simple thing I want you to remember about today's conversation? I think it's that rest is important. It's God-given. It's something that He wants us to honor, but we are the only ones who are going to give ourselves permission to rest. No one else is going to do that. So take ownership of it, create your own boundaries, figure out what you need, and then you will be ready to live the life that God has called you to do. Okay, that is all for today. Go out there and have a graced day.